My boyfriend ghosted me after our vacation, so I posted the hotel receipt with his name on it. I stared at the hotel receipt in my trembling hands, the Ocean View Resort and Spa letterhead mocking me with its elegant typography. $23,000. My vision blurred as I read through the itemized charges again, my graphic designer's eye catching details I'd missed the first time. Room upgrade to presidential suite. Private beachfront dinner for 2, charged 3 times during our 7-day stay. Couples spa package, booked twice. The timestamps didn't lie. While I'd been at the resort's art workshop on Tuesday afternoon, Marcus had been enjoying a romantic sunset massage with someone else. While I'd taken that morning yoga class on Thursday, he'd ordered champagne and strawberries to our room. Our room. Except it wasn't ours at all, was it? My name appeared on the receipt as a guest, but every charge bore Marcus Holloway's signature. And there, in the bottom corner, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, charged to Stellar Marketing Group corporate account, business development trip. I'd been a prop in someone else's fraud. The text notification that had arrived 3 weeks ago still burned in my memory. Emma, this isn't working. I need space. Don't contact me. 13 words to end 2 years, followed immediately by the discovery that I was blocked everywhere. Phone, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. As if I'd never existed. As if those 2 years of my life, of building what I thought was a future together, had been erased with the casual swipe of his finger across a screen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really began. Because the truth is, the warning signs were always there. I just loved him too much to see them clearly. I met Marcus Holloway on a rainy Thursday evening at a networking event for young professionals in downtown Chicago. I'd been dragging my feet about attending, preferring to spend my evening working on client projects in my small studio apartment. But my best friend Jade had insisted that I needed to get out there and make connections. I'd compromised by promising to stay for exactly 1 hour before heading home. Marcus appeared beside me at the bar, all confident smile and expensive cologne, his tailored navy suit fitting him perfectly. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he'd said, his dark eyes twinkling with amusement. Same, honestly. But my boss thinks these things are essential for building the brand. He'd made air quotes with his fingers, and I'd laughed despite myself. "Graphic designer," I'd said when he asked what I did. "Freelance. I work with small businesses mostly. Logo design, branding packages, website layouts." "That's incredible," he'd responded with what seemed like genuine interest. "I'm in marketing at Stellar Marketing Group. We're always looking for creative talent. Here, let me give you my card." The card was thick, expensive cardstock with embossed lettering. Marcus Holloway, Senior Marketing Executive. At the time, I'd been impressed by his title, his confidence, the way he seemed to command the room's attention even in casual conversation. He'd asked for my number before the night ended, and I'd given it to him, butterflies dancing in my stomach. Our first date had been at a trendy Italian restaurant in River North. I'd dressed carefully, choosing my favorite emerald dress and the vintage earrings my grandmother had given me. Marcus had been charming, asking questions about my work, my family, my dreams. He'd ordered expensive wine and talked about his career trajectory at Stellar Marketing Group, how he was being groomed for a director position, how he saw himself running his own agency someday. When the check came, he'd glanced at it briefly before looking up at me with an apologetic smile. "Would you mind if we split this? I'm trying to be more conscious about my spending. Saving for a down payment on a condo, you know?" I'd agreed immediately, appreciating what I thought was his financial responsibility. The bill had been $240. My half wiped out most of my weekly grocery budget, but I'd told myself it was worth it. He was worth it. That pattern continued throughout our relationship. Nice restaurants where we always split the check, even when he'd insisted on ordering the most expensive items on the menu. Weekend trips to his friend's lake house where I'd paid for gas and groceries. Concert tickets I'd purchased because he'd mentioned loving the band, only to find out he'd invited his colleague to join us at the last minute. "You're so independent, Emma," he'd say, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "That's what I love about you. You don't need a man to take care of you. You're not like other women who expect to be wined and dined." I'd taken it as a compliment. Now I recognize it for what it was. Manipulation wrapped in flattery, a way to make me feel special while ensuring I subsidized his lifestyle. My friends noticed before I did. Jade, who'd known me since college, had pulled me aside after Marcus and I had been dating for 6 months. We were at her apartment for our usual Sunday brunch, and she'd made her famous lemon ricotta pancakes, but I could barely taste them as she voiced her concerns. "Emma, honey, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me," she'd started, her brown eyes serious. "Marcus hasn't posted a single photo of you on his Instagram, not one, in 6 months. He's private about his personal life," I'd defended automatically. "Not everyone needs to broadcast their relationship on social media." "Okay, but he posts constantly," Jade had countered, pulling up his profile on her phone. "Look, here he is at a charity gala last week. Here's his Sunday morning coffee ritual. Here's his workout routine. Here's him and his boys at a Cubs game. He posts multiple times a week, Emma. Just never about you. And you've told me he doesn't really post about you on LinkedIn either, even though you've done design work for some of his clients. We're just different about social media," I'd insisted, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Then there was my brother David, who'd met Marcus at my mother's birthday dinner 8 months into our relationship. David worked in finance and had an analytical mind that I both admired and sometimes found frustrating. After dessert, he'd asked to speak with me privately in my mom's garden. "There's something off about that guy," David had said bluntly, his arms crossed. "I can't put my finger on it exactly, but the way he talks about money, about his career, it doesn't add up." He name-dropped 3 VPs at his company during dinner, made it sound like he's basically running the place, but when I looked up Stellar Marketing Group's website, he's listed as an account manager, not a senior executive. That's a pretty significant discrepancy. "Maybe the website isn't updated," I'd argued, feeling defensive. "Companies aren't always on top of that stuff. You of all people should know how bureaucratic large organizations can be." David had given me a long look, the kind that reminded me of our father before he'd passed away. "Just be careful, Em. I want you to be happy, but I also want you to be smart. People who exaggerate one thing usually exaggerate everything." I'd brushed off his concerns too, so eager to believe in the relationship I was building with Marcus that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Love, I've learned, can be a very effective blindfold. The Maldives trip had been Marcus's idea, presented to me on a random Tuesday evening when he'd shown up at my apartment with takeout Thai food and an excited gleam in his eye. We'd been dating for a year and 9 months at that point, and I'd started to wonder quietly when, or if, our relationship would progress to the next level. "I have a surprise for you," he'd announced, setting the food containers on my small kitchen table. "How would you like to spend a week in paradise? The Maldives, Emma. Crystal blue water, white sand beaches, overwater bungalows. I found an incredible deal through a travel site my company uses for client entertainment." My heart had soared. This was it, the grand romantic gesture I'd been hoping for, the sign that he was as serious about our future as I was. "Marcus, that's amazing. When would we go?" 3 weeks from now. I know it's short notice, but this deal won't last. It's already booked. I put it on my card because I didn't want to risk losing it. Your half comes out to about $4,000. Can you swing that? The soaring feeling had faltered slightly. $4,000 was a substantial chunk of my savings, money I'd been carefully setting aside for equipment upgrades for my design business. But looking at Marcus's eager face, the excitement in his eyes, I'd told myself this was an investment in our relationship. How many couples get to experience the Maldives together? This would be our story, the trip we'd tell our future children about. "Yes," I'd said, pushing down the financial anxiety. "Let me transfer you the money tomorrow." The 3 weeks leading up to the trip had been a whirlwind of preparation. I'd bought new swimsuits, a sundress I'd been admiring online for months, an expensive reef-safe sunscreen. Marcus had been attentive during this period, texting me links to activities we could do, restaurants at the resort we should try, photos of the sunset view from our bungalow. I'd felt closer to him than ever. The flight to the Maldives had been long but bearable, filled with anticipation. Marcus had slept most of the way, his head against the window, while I'd pored over the resort information packet, making mental notes of everything I wanted to experience. The Ocean View Resort and Spa was 5-star luxury, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in glossy travel magazines. Private bungalows over turquoise water, a world-class spa, 3 gourmet restaurants, and a reputation for catering to honeymooners and couples celebrating special occasions. When we'd arrived, exhausted but excited, the resort had exceeded even my highest expectations. Our bungalow was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Indian Ocean, a private deck with steps leading directly into the water, a king-size bed with gauzy white curtains that billowed in the ocean breeze. I'd actually cried a little, overwhelmed by the beauty and by what I thought this trip represented for us. "This is perfect," I'd whispered, wrapping my arms around Marcus. "Thank you for bringing me here." He'd kissed the top of my head, but I'd noticed he was already checking his phone. "Work emergency," he'd muttered. "Give me a few minutes to handle this and then I'm all yours, I promise." Those few minutes had turned into an hour, then another. Throughout our entire week at the resort, Marcus had been constantly on his phone, stepping away to take calls, disappearing for stretches of time that he'd explain away as dealing with a difficult client or putting out fires at the office. On our second day, I'd suggested we try the couples massage at the spa, something I'd been looking forward to for weeks. Marcus had checked his phone, frowned, and said, "You go ahead. I have a video call with the team that can't wait. We'll do it another day, I promise." We never did do it together. In fact, according to the receipt now in my hands, he'd done it twice. Just not with me. I'd convinced myself his distraction was just work stress, that he was dealing with a particularly demanding project. I'd spent Tuesday afternoon at the resort's watercolor painting workshop, creating a small piece of the sunset that I'd planned to frame and hang in our future home together. While I'd been mixing colors and chatting with other resort guests about art techniques, Marcus had been ordering champagne and enjoying a romantic beachfront dining experience with someone else. Thursday morning, I'd attended an early yoga class on the beach, trying to find some zen despite Marcus's distant behavior. The instructor had been wonderful, guiding us through sun salutations as the waves lapped nearby. I'd felt peaceful for the first time since we'd arrived. Meanwhile, according to those damning timestamps, Marcus had been in our bungalow with someone else, ordering breakfast in bed and premium champagne service. There had been one perfect day during the trip, Wednesday. Marcus had been fully present, attentive, affectionate. We'd gone snorkeling together, exploring the coral reef and holding hands underwater as colorful fish darted around us. We'd had lunch at the resort's beachside cafe, and he'd actually put his phone away for 2 full hours. That evening, we'd watched the sunset from our deck, and he'd said, "I can see us doing this for the rest of our lives, Em. Growing old together, taking trips like this every year." I'd believed him. God, how desperately I'd believed him. Now, looking back with clear eyes, I realized that Wednesday was the day his other woman wasn't there. It was the only day he could actually be present with me because he wasn't juggling 2 separate romantic entanglies at the same luxury resort. The flight home had been quiet. Marcus had seemed preoccupied, barely speaking except to tell me he had a lot of work to catch up on. I'd attributed it to post-vacation blues and the stress of returning to reality. We'd shared a taxi from the airport, and he'd kissed me goodbye at my apartment building, promising to call me the next day. That was the last time I saw him. The next day came and went with no call. I'd sent a text. "Hope you're surviving the work catch-up. Let me know when you want to grab dinner." No response. Another day passed. I'd called and left a voicemail, trying to keep my voice light. "Hey, just checking in. Miss you. Call me when you can." On the 3rd day, I'd started to panic. Had something happened to him? Was he okay? I'd almost called his workplace, but something had held me back. The last shred of my dignity, perhaps, or the growing suspicion that his silence was intentional. The text had arrived on day 4, early in the morning, while I was working on a logo design for a new client. My phone had buzzed, and my heart had leaped, thinking finally he was reaching out. Instead, I'd gotten 13 words that shattered me. "Emma, this isn't working. I need space. Don't contact me." I'd stared at that text for 10 minutes, reading it over and over, trying to understand. This isn't working? We'd just spent a week in the Maldives together. He'd talked about our future. What had changed so drastically in 4 days? I'd tried calling. The call hadn't gone through, I'd been blocked. I'd opened Instagram to send him a message there, only to discover I'd been blocked on that platform too. Facebook, blocked. LinkedIn, blocked. He'd systematically erased me from every possible avenue of communication. The humiliation had been crushing. I'd called Jade, sobbing so hard I could barely get the words out. She'd come over immediately, bringing wine and tissues and righteous anger on my behalf. "He's a coward," she'd declared, sitting on my couch while I curled up in a ball beside her. "A complete and total coward. Who ends a 2-year relationship with a text and then blocks the person? Someone who was never mature enough for a real relationship to begin with, that's who." "But why?" I'd kept asking. What did I do wrong? Was it something I said on the trip? Was I too clingy? Not attentive enough? Did I— "Stop," Jade had interrupted firmly. "You did nothing wrong. This is about him, Emma, not you. Something is seriously off here, and honestly, I think you dodged a bullet." 2 weeks after the ghosting, I'd gotten my answer about what had changed. Jade had called me, her voice hesitant. "Emma, I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate it. Marcus is dating someone new, like publicly dating her. She posted about him on her Instagram story." My stomach had dropped. "Already? We broke up 2 weeks ago. He's already—" "Her name is Victoria Sterling," Jade had continued gently. "I did some digging. She's an influencer, one of those lifestyle bloggers with like 500,000 followers. Her family owns Sterling Properties, that big real estate development company. She's been posting photos with Marcus from what looks like the past 3 weeks. Emma, I think he might have been seeing her while you were together." I'd pulled up Victoria Sterling's Instagram with shaking hands. There she was, stunning, blonde, perfectly curated life on display. Photos of elaborate brunches, designer handbags, charity galas. And there, among the carefully filtered images, was Marcus. Marcus at a rooftop bar 3 weeks ago, the caption reading, "Surprised by this amazing man." Marcus at what looked like a family dinner 2 weeks ago. Marcus at a concert I recognized, the one I'd bought tickets for, the one he'd invited his colleague to attend with us. The colleague had been her. The timeline meant he'd been seeing Victoria while we were together, possibly for months. He'd brought her to an event I'd paid for. He'd been building a relationship with her while promising me a future. And then, when I'd served my purpose, paying for half of an elaborate vacation that he'd expensed as a business trip, he'd discarded me via text and immediately gone public with his real girlfriend. I'd spent the next few days in a fog of grief and rage. I'd missed client deadlines for the first time in my career. I'd stopped eating properly. I'd replayed every moment of our relationship, seeing all the red flags I'd ignored in bright, glaring color, the separate checks that ensured I was always paying my fair share while he saved his money, the social media blackout that allowed him to present as single to women like Victoria, the work calls that had seemed so urgent but were probably conversations with her, the way he'd never fully committed to me publicly, never introduced me to his family, never made space for me in the parts of his life that really mattered. I'd been a convenience. A part-time girlfriend who paid her own way and didn't demand too much attention or public acknowledgement. The moment someone better came along, someone with money, status, and social media influence, I'd become disposable. 3 weeks after the breakup, I'd finally started packing away the remnants of our relationship. I'd put away the photos from the Maldives, each one now tainted by the knowledge of his betrayal. I'd donated the shirts he'd left at my apartment, unable to stand looking at them. I'd deleted our text conversations, though I'd kept his breakup text, some masochistic part of me needing evidence that this had really happened. That's when I'd found the receipt. It had been tucked into the resort's welcome folder, which I'd shoved into my suitcase on our last day without really looking at it. The folder also contained information about the resort's amenities, a list of local emergency contacts, and a handwritten note from the manager thanking us for choosing Ocean View Resort and Spa for our romantic getaway. The receipt had slipped out when I dumped the folder into my recycling bin, the heavy cream-colored paper catching my eye. I'd picked it up out of habit. The graphic designer in me always notices quality paper stock, and started reading almost absently. Then I'd actually read it again, and again. $23,000. For 7 nights at a resort where my portion had supposedly been $4,000. The math didn't work, not even close. I'd grabbed my laptop and started going through the itemized charges carefully, cross-referencing them with my memories of the trip and with the photos on my phone. Each discrepancy had hit me like a physical blow. Room upgrade to presidential suite. 8 stars, $500. Marcus had told me we were in a standard overwater bungalow and that we'd gotten lucky with a free upgrade because it was off-season. The receipt showed he'd paid for the top-tier accommodation and lied about it. Why? So I wouldn't question why my half of the trip was only $4,000 when the room alone cost more than that? Private beachfront dinner Tuesday 7 p.m., $850. I'd been at the art workshop. When I'd returned to the bungalow that evening, Marcus had been there, claiming he'd ordered room service and eaten while finishing up work calls. The receipt said otherwise. Couples spa package, Tuesday, 2 p.m., $1, $200. Again, I'd been at the art workshop. Marcus had said he was on a video call with his team. Premium champagne service, Thursday, 9 a.m., $600. I'd been at beach yoga. Marcus had claimed he'd slept in because he was exhausted. Private beachfront dinner, Friday, 6 p.m., $850. I'd had a headache that evening and had stayed in the bungalow, encouraging Marcus to get some fresh air and enjoy the resort. He'd returned 3 hours later, claiming he'd just walked the beach and sat at the bar. Another lie. Couples spa package, Saturday, 3 p.m., $1, $200. Our second to last day. I'd wanted to do one final snorkeling excursion and had gone with a group from the resort. Marcus had said he needed to rest. The evidence was irrefutable. While I'd been paying for what I thought was half of a romantic vacation with my boyfriend, Marcus had been entertaining someone else at the same resort. He'd been running 2 separate romantic vacations simultaneously, using my presence and my money to create the cover he needed while expensing the entire thing as a business trip. But it was the detail in the bottom corner that transformed my heartbreak into something sharper, something closer to cold fury. Charge to Stellar Marketing Group corporate account. Business development trip. Marcus had committed fraud. He'd taken his girlfriend, or more accurately, both his girlfriends, on a luxury vacation and billed it to his company as a business expense. He'd used corporate funds to pay for romantic dinners and couples massages while entertaining multiple women. He'd stolen from his employer while simultaneously deceiving me. I'd sat on my floor for a long time, the receipt in my hands, my mind racing through options. Part of me wanted to crumple it up and throw it away, to try to move on and forget Marcus Holloway had ever existed. But a louder part of me, the part that had been humiliated and ghosted and lied to for 2 years, wanted justice. Wanted him to face consequences. Wanted the truth to be known. I'd thought about calling Stellar Marketing Group directly, reporting the fraud to his employer. But that felt too private, too easy for him to explain away or cover up. I'd thought about confronting Victoria Sterling, warning her about who she was really dating. But she'd probably just dismiss me as a jealous ex-girlfriend. Then I'd remembered something Jade had said weeks ago, when she'd first shown me Victoria's Instagram. Everything exists on social media now. If something isn't posted online, it basically didn't happen. And if something is posted online, everyone knows about it. I'd opened my Instagram account, the one I used primarily for showcasing my design work to potential clients. I'd had about 3,000 followers, small businesses I'd worked with, other designers in my network, friends and family. Nothing like Victoria Sterling's 500,000 following, but a respectable professional presence. With trembling hands, I'd photographed the receipt, making sure every detail was clearly visible. The Ocean View Resort and Spa letterhead, the dates of our stay, the itemized charges with their timestamps, Marcus's name and signature, the corporate account information at the bottom. Then I'd started typing the caption, my fingers moving faster as anger and clarity flowed through me. Story time. 2 weeks ago, the man I'd been dating for 2 years ghosted me via text immediately after we returned from what I thought was a romantic vacation to the Maldives, blocked me on every platform. No explanation, no closure, just gone. I was heartbroken and confused, blaming myself, wondering what I'd done wrong. Then I found this receipt from our resort. Some things you'll notice. While I was at an art workshop on Tuesday, my boyfriend was enjoying a private beachfront dinner with someone else. While I was at yoga on Thursday morning, he was having champagne and breakfast delivered to our room for him and his companion. Those work calls he kept taking, apparently, they included couples spa packages, twice. He told me my half of the trip was $4,000. The actual cost was $23,000, charged to his company's corporate account as a business development trip. I paid $4,000 to be a prop in someone else's fraud. I'm posting this not out of revenge, but because truth matters. Because other women deserve to know who they're dealing with. Because companies deserve to know when their resources are being stolen. And because staying silent protects people who hurt others. If you've been lied to, gaslit, or ghosted, know that it's not your fault. The problem wasn't that you weren't enough. It's that they were never enough for you. Marcus Holloway, Stellar Marketing Group. I hope this finds you well. I'd hesitated for just a moment before hitting post, my finger hovering over the button. This would be public. Permanent. There would be no taking it back. Was I absolutely sure? I'd looked at the receipt again, at the evidence of his calculated deception, and I'd pressed post. The response had been immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, the post had 100 comments. Within 3 hours, 1,000. By the end of the day, it had been shared more than 50,000 times. My phone had been buzzing constantly with notifications, messages of support, similar stories from other women, expressions of outrage on my behalf. Several comments had come from people who worked in finance or corporate compliance, tagging Stellar Marketing Group's official account and pointing out the expense fraud. Others had tagged Victoria Sterling, asking if she'd known she was the other woman. Business ethics accounts had picked up the story, using it as an example of corporate fraud and relationship manipulation. The local news had contacted me by day 2, asking if I'd be willing to be interviewed about corporate expense fraud and relationship deception. I'd declined, not wanting to turn this into a media circus, but the story had taken on a life of its own. By day 3, Jade had called me with an update. "Emma, you need to see Victoria Sterling's Instagram. She just posted." Victoria's post had been brief. "I'm disgusted to learn that someone I was dating was lying to both me and another woman. I was told she was an ex from years ago who he'd taken on a final closure trip. I believed him because I'm an idiot who wanted to believe the best in people. Emma Chen, I'm so sorry for any pain this situation has caused you. You deserved so much better. We both did." The comments on her post had been supportive, and several people had pointed out that we'd both been victims of the same manipulator. Some had even suggested we connect and share our experiences. The narrative had shifted from me being the jilted ex-girlfriend to both of us being women who'd been deceived by a man skilled at manipulation. Day 4 had brought the news I'd been waiting for. An official statement from Stellar Marketing Group appeared on their LinkedIn. Stellar Marketing Group takes allegations of expense fraud and misuse of corporate resources extremely seriously. We have launched a full investigation into the matters brought to our attention regarding employee Marcus Holloway. We will not be commenting further while this investigation is ongoing. Jade had called again, barely able to contain her excitement. "Emma, I have a friend who works in HR at a company in the same building as Stellar. She says Marcus was escorted out by security this morning with a box of his belongings. He's been terminated and they're pursuing legal action for the expense fraud. Apparently, your receipt was just the tip of the iceberg. Once they started investigating, they found months of fraudulent expenses." The vindication had felt sweet, but also hollow in a way I hadn't expected. Yes, Marcus was facing consequences. Yes, the truth was out. Yes, I'd been publicly validated, but it didn't erase the 2 years I'd spent with someone who'd never truly valued me. It didn't refund the money I'd spent subsidizing his lifestyle. It didn't heal the part of my heart that had genuinely loved him and believed in our future together. The most unexpected outcome had come a week after the original post. I'd received a direct message on Instagram from a woman named Ashley Rodriguez. "Emma, I don't know if you remember me, but we met briefly at that networking event where you first met Marcus. I need to tell you something. I dated Marcus for a year and a half before he ghosted me too. The exact same way, text message, blocked everywhere, no explanation. It was 2.5 years ago. I blamed myself for so long, thought I'd done something wrong. Seeing your post made me realize it was never about me. Would you be willing to talk?" I'd agreed, and we'd met for coffee. Ashley had been warm and genuine, and her story had been eerily similar to mine. Marcus had love-bombed her initially, made grand promises about their future, always insisted on splitting checks while living beyond his means. He'd kept her separate from his work life and social media. Then when someone better came along, me, It turned out he'd discarded her without explanation. "There's probably more of us," Ashley had said quietly. "This is clearly his pattern. Serial monogamy with overlap, always trading up for whatever he thinks will benefit him most, whether that's financial or social status." She'd been right. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more women had reached out to me with similar stories. Marcus had been running this same playbook for at least 5 years, cycling through women who didn't suspect they were being used as placeholders until someone more advantageous came along. We'd formed an unlikely support group, the 5 of us, meeting occasionally for coffee or wine, and processing our collective experience with Marcus Holloway. There had been healing in that, in realizing we'd all been fooled by the same charming facade, that the problem had never been our individual inadequacies, but rather his consistent pattern of deception and exploitation. 2 months after my original post, I'd received a formal letter from Stellar Marketing Group's legal department. They'd recovered over $80,000 in fraudulent expenses from Marcus spanning 18 months. He'd been charged with corporate fraud and theft. The letter had thanked me for bringing the matter to their attention and had mentioned that they were implementing new expense reporting procedures to prevent future fraud. I'd also received a cashier's check from Marcus's attorney for $4,000, my portion of the Maldives trip, along with a tersely worded letter stating that Mr. Holloway wished to resolve any outstanding financial matters and requesting that I not pursue any further legal action. I'd deposited the check and used the money to upgrade my design equipment, investing in my own future rather than someone else's lies. Victoria Sterling had actually reached out to me privately, suggesting we meet in person. I'd been hesitant. What did we really have to say to each other? But curiosity had won out. We'd met at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park, both of us awkward at first, unsure how to navigate this strange connection. "I genuinely didn't know," she'd said, her perfectly manicured hands wrapped around a latte. "About you, about the overlap, about any of it. He told me you were an ex he was helping get closure by taking you on a final trip. He made it sound noble, like he was being kind by giving you a proper goodbye. I thought it was a green flag, actually, that he was mature enough to end things properly with someone he'd cared about." I'd wanted to be angry with her, but I couldn't summon it. She'd been lied to just as thoroughly as I had, just in different ways. "Did you know about the expense fraud?" She'd shaken her head. "Not until your post. He always seemed successful, but I never saw him spend extravagantly when we were together. He'd suggest expensive places, but then say he was watching his budget, so we'd split the cost. It never occurred to me that he was using his corporate card for everything else." "That was his pattern," I'd said. "Make us pay our half so he could save his money and use stolen corporate funds for the lifestyle he wanted everyone to think he could afford." We'd talked for 2 hours that day, comparing notes, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of who Marcus really was. It had been cathartic in an unexpected way. By the end of our conversation, we'd exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. 3 months after the post, my design business had actually grown significantly. The viral nature of my story had brought attention to my work, and several companies had reached out asking if I'd be interested in design projects. I'd been featured in a small business podcast about standing up for yourself and turning painful experiences into positive change. My follower count had grown to over 50,000, and while I'd never wanted to be an influencer, I'd started using the platform to share design tips and occasionally post about my journey toward healing. Jade had been my rock throughout everything, showing up with wine and wisdom whenever I'd needed it, celebrating my victories, and holding space for my grief. "You know what I'm most proud of?" she'd said one evening as we sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset. "You didn't let him make you bitter. You exposed the truth, yes, but you did it with integrity. You didn't shame him. You just presented facts. And then you used what happened to help other people. That takes strength, Em." I'd thought about that a lot. I could have made my original post cruel, could have launched into personal attacks or public shaming, but I'd stuck to the truth, to the documented facts, and I'd let those facts speak for themselves. The receipt had been damning enough without me adding vitriol. 6 months after posting the receipt, I'd been working late on a branding project when I'd received a text from an unknown number. "Emma, this is Marcus. I know I have no right to contact you, and I'll understand if you block this number immediately. But I needed to say, I'm sorry. Not because I think it will change anything or because I expect forgiveness, but because you deserved so much better than how I treated you. You were kind, genuine, and generous, and I took advantage of that. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I kept hurting people who cared about me. This isn't an excuse. There is no excuse for what I did. I just wanted you to know that you weren't the problem. You never were. I hope you're doing well. I'd stared at that text for a long time, a complicated mix of emotions swirling through me. Part of me had wanted to respond with anger, to list every way he'd hurt me, to make him truly understand the depth of the betrayal. But mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of holding on to the weight of what he'd done, tired of giving him space in my head. I'd typed and deleted several responses before settling on simple honesty. I appreciate you saying that. I hope therapy helps you become the person you're trying to be. I'm doing well now, moving forward with my life. I wish you the same. Then I'd blocked the number, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. That chapter of my life was closed, and I didn't need to keep the door even slightly ajar. The most profound change had been internal. I'd spent years of my life making myself small, convenient, and low maintenance because I'd believed that was what made me lovable. I'd split checks I couldn't afford, ignored warning signs, and accepted breadcrumbs of affection because I'd been afraid that asking for more would make me too demanding, too difficult, too much. Now, I understood that the right person wouldn't make me feel like my needs were burdensome. The right relationship wouldn't require me to minimize myself to make someone else comfortable. I'd learned to recognize love bombing for what it was, to spot manipulation wrapped in flattery, to trust my instincts when something felt off. I'd also learned the power of speaking truth. My Instagram post hadn't been about revenge. It had been about refusing to protect someone else's lies at the expense of my own voice. It had been about warning other women, holding a company accountable for oversight failures, and refusing to shoulder the blame for someone else's deception. 1 year after the Maldives trip, I'd been invited to speak at a women's professional networking event about navigating professional and personal betrayal. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, I'd felt something shift inside me. The experience with Marcus had been painful, but it had also taught me lessons I wouldn't have learned any other way. It had shown me my own strength, my capacity to survive heartbreak and come out stronger on the other side. The receipt was evidence, I'd told the audience. But more than that, it was permission. Permission to trust what I'd known in my gut, but had been afraid to acknowledge. Permission to speak up instead of staying silent. Permission to stop protecting people who'd hurt me. Sometimes the truth isn't pretty, and sometimes sharing it feels scary. But I've learned that speaking truth, even when your voice shakes, is an act of self-respect. And that matters more than staying comfortable or polite. The applause had been thunderous, but more meaningful had been the women who'd approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of being gaslit, manipulated, or deceived. Many of them had thanked me for giving them the courage to speak their own truths, to stop accepting less than they deserved, to recognize that being alone was better than being with someone who made them feel worthless. Today, as I sit in my newly expanded home office, funded by the growth of my design business, I sometimes think about that receipt, now filed away in a folder labeled Lessons Learned. It represents both the worst and the best of that period of my life. The worst because of what it revealed about someone I'd loved and trusted. The best because of what it revealed about my own strength and resilience. I've learned that vindication isn't always about watching someone else fail or suffer consequences, though I won't pretend there wasn't satisfaction in seeing Marcus face the legal ramifications of his fraud. Real vindication is about reclaiming your own narrative, about refusing to let someone else's version of events define you, about speaking truth, and then moving forward into a life that's fuller and more authentic because of what you've survived. Ashley, Victoria, and the other women Marcus had deceived have all moved forward too. We still check in with each other occasionally, a support network born from shared experience. Ashley is engaged now to someone who, by her account, treats her with the respect and honesty she deserves. Victoria has used her platform to speak about relationship red flags and emotional manipulation, helping her hundreds of thousands of followers recognize warning signs in their own relationships. As for Marcus, I've heard through mutual acquaintances that he's working in a much smaller firm now, his professional reputation damaged by the fraud scandal. I don't follow his life closely. That would give him too much power, too much space in my present when he's firmly part of my past. I hope he's actually doing the work he mentioned in that text, becoming someone better. But more than that, I hope his future partners see the warning signs, ask the hard questions, and protect themselves in ways I didn't know I needed to. The design work I'm doing now fulfills me in ways I never expected. Without the financial and emotional drain of subsidizing Marcus's lifestyle, I've been able to invest in my business, take on projects that excite me rather than just pay the bills, and build something that's entirely mine. I've started teaching weekend workshops for other freelance designers, sharing the skills I've developed over years of trial and error. I've created a life that's full and meaningful on my own terms. I'm dating again too, cautiously, but with clearer boundaries and stronger instincts. I split checks sometimes, but I also let people treat me sometimes. And I've learned to recognize the difference between someone who values partnership and someone who's looking for a subsidizer. I post on social media about my relationships when I'm ready, and I expect the same transparency in return. I trust my gut when something feels off instead of talking myself out of my own perceptions. Last month, I returned to the Maldives with Jade, reclaiming that experience on my own terms. We stayed at a different resort, smaller and less extravagant, but perfect for what we needed. A celebration of friendship and resilience, a reminder that beautiful experiences don't require the presence of people who diminish you. We snorkeled the coral reefs, took sunset photos, and laughed until our sides hurt. I painted watercolors again, this time without the shadow of betrayal hanging over the experience. On our last evening, sitting on the beach watching the sun sink into the Indian Ocean, Jade had raised her glass to me. To Emma Chen, who took a heartbreak and turned it into a masterclass in standing up for yourself, I'm proud of you, friend. I'd clinked my glass against hers, feeling a peace I hadn't known was possible a year ago. To speaking truth, I'd said, to refusing to stay silent, to protecting ourselves and each other. The receipt that had exposed Marcus's fraud had also freed me, from the illusion of a relationship that was never real, from the burden of carrying someone else's lies, from the fear of speaking up and being heard. It had been a painful gift, but a gift nonetheless, one that taught me the invaluable lesson that truth, however difficult, is always worth speaking. And that's worth more than any vacation, any relationship, any temporary comfort could ever be. If you're reading this and you've experienced something similar, being ghosted, gaslit, manipulated, or deceived, know that your voice matters. Your truth matters. You don't have to protect people who hurt you. You don't have to stay silent to keep the peace. You don't have to make yourself small to make someone else comfortable. Speak your truth. Trust your instincts. Know your worth. And if you have a receipt that tells a story someone doesn't want told, maybe it's time to post it.